Hello, here we are, yet another episode of Showboys. My name is Mike, your host, joined as always by my good friend Nick and our other good friend Chad. There we are, the What's Playing crew. Yes, tonight is our monthly video game episode. So welcome back, Chad. Glad you could join us.
Yes, happy to be here as always.
Indeed. So how you guys doing tonight? Let's just get that out of the way. The pleasantries.
We're doing great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Nice.
We're here. We made it.
We're here.
Love your jersey.
Thank you. Rocking the Cloud9 jersey. You know, got another big weekend coming up this week.
Look at AT&T on the wow. Look at them and their sponsorships.
Red Bull, BMW, Twitch, HyperX, AT&T, Microsoft, whatever this is, right here on the shoulder. Can't really tell.
Guitar Hero.
Yeah. Puma's the new one. You can see that the old nip right here. Got game tomorrow night, Saturday night, Sunday. I'm excited. We're in first place. I don't know why I keep saying we're. Like I'm on the team.
Like you're part of the team. Yeah.
Might as well be.
Yeah.
Well, like I was saying earlier, I bought their chair, their secret lab chair. I bought it.
I know, and that makes me really sad because one, I want like an actual video game chair, and two, I really want their chair, but it's like $1 billion, and I'm not a millionaire like Nick, so I'm just slumming it with this like Office Depot faux leather chair that squeaks and stuff.
I've been using one from our abandoned office.
Oh, those are the worst.
Yeah.
Those chairs are so uncomfortable. But yes, so enough about our chairs and my favorite esports organization. Tonight, we thought we would tackle what I hope is a fun conversation, a fun topic, being storytelling in video games. What makes video games such a good medium for telling stories, and all that kind of stuff. Some of the games that we like that are very heavily narrative driven, and things like that. So we got a lot of input from listeners and stuff on our Discord and Facebook page, so I'm really excited to get into that later. But yeah, I figured we could just start out with a little blurb I found about storytelling just in general. Storytelling is a great social and cultural activity of sharing stories with an aim to educate, entertain, and instill moral values, which are mostly used in the cultural oral storytelling events. So the last couple of weeks I've been really into like giving a definition or setting like a baseline. I don't know if you noticed that, Nick, but
I appreciate it. It helps a lot, actually.
Yeah. So the source for this is the internet. There wasn't actually a particular source. It was the first thing that popped up when I Googled storytelling.
They give sources, by the way, but you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I'm a boomer, so they're just lucky I can even Google things.
I was on the Google today.
Yeah, on the Google book. But yeah, I mean, what are your guys' thoughts just as a whole, like very generalized thoughts, to start us off here on just like your interest in storytelling and how you think the gaming industry is able to utilize that. Guess we'll start with you, Nick.
Me? Well, yeah. I was going to start just by big shout out to everyone in our Discord for that answered, your question here, kind of prepping for this episode, because they all gave really great answers, and
they really did.
I feel like we should just really cite them the entire episode, and that would be an entire episode worth of content, because they said some really good points.
You know, now that you say that, I was actually thinking, usually we wait till the very end to, do our listener picks or comments or whatever. I was thinking maybe this might be a good one to do those at the front end of the episode, because it might actually add a lot, to the conversation. So I feel like if we wait till the end, we'll read all those and then we'll go down like each rabbit hole of comment, and then our episode will be like 6 hours long.
That's actually a pretty good idea, actually, the way you're talking about doing it now.
Yeah. So what do you think, Chad? What is your like baseline generalization of the topic tonight?
I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of points that put video games ahead of storytelling in almost every other different form. And we'll get to that in the episode, but I think that video games have a kind of unique ability to allow you to craft your own story within the games. And I think that's something that's obviously lost in movies and books. And you're starting to see it now with like these choose your own adventure TV shows. Like Black had an episode that was like you got to pick and that kind of stuff. So it's funny to see people that are like anti-video game getting all hyped about these things. And like, we've been doing this for 25 years. Like this is not really anything new, but
yeah, I'm excited to hear your points of view and opinions and whatnot, since you're more of I know Nick gets into single player games too, but out of the three of us, you're probably the most single player campaign oriented player. So yeah, I'm excited to really dig into that. So yeah, Nick, you just want to start off with some of the comments from the Discord?
Yeah, I think, glaze through these. A lot of them are very in depth and they bring up a lot of good points.
Yeah, there's some pretty long ones, which I love.
So I think
I was going to say there are some that are very, very long.
Yeah. And I think maybe we extract like elements that they mainly like touch on. So like the first one here by Tom.
Old Tom from B Hero.
He comes in first and heavy with the first one, and he, his first big point is the idea that you get to experience the story as the character, which is something that is obviously lost in movies and every other medium. I would say maybe you can get that in books, right? Because books have a different way of pulling you in as the character, especially if they're written a certain way. But I mean, that's a big upsell for games in that you are physically, a lot of times physically, because I know when I play games and they get intense, like I am physically moving and I'm sweating and I get angry, all of that. So, that's a huge point, I think, that just brings you to the whole next level there when it comes to getting into a story and experiencing it.
Yeah, so he says video games often tell the most I think it might have been a typo because I don't know what he's trying to say with that word, stories, because you get to experience it as the character. It's why survival horror games are so effectively scary, because you get that personal tie with the character. Some noteworthy games would be Dante's Inferno. It's an original story that uses descriptive setting of the classic book. Silent Hill 2, talk about pulling you in for a heart-wrenching story, plus with the alternate endings, it has good replayability. Tomb Raider Reboot is a fantastic next-gen example of great storytelling. When it comes to shooters, the original Halo is a classic, but Destiny 1, if you take the time to go through the Grimoire, is my favorite sci-fi storytelling for a game. So yeah, kind of on your point too, Nick, one little thing I wrote down is the one thing that I really love about storytelling in video games is that through this avenue, this platform, it's the only one that is actively trying to prevent you from making progress in the story, right? The everything in the game is trying to stop you from moving forward, which makes you an active participant
right
in the story and not just a passive consumer.
Right.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. So it really, like you were saying, it really immerses you, obviously, because you are in control. You're not just reading the events that are happening. You're not just sitting, on your couch or in a movie theater chair watching everything unfold to other characters. You are acting out, like following through, controlling the character against all of the story elements, which I feel like takes the storytelling element like through the roof because you're actually experiencing it.
Well, plus, kind of like to that, now that I'm thinking about it, is because you're working against the game to progress through the story, that kind of like entices you, like the story, like if you're into the story, you might be better at the game because you are in the zone and you're like, I'm going to kill this boss, I'm going to run this very hard series of like platform objectives, like, and you just hit that stride where you didn't mess up and you just went through something like a breeze because you're in the zone.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think it gets you much more emotionally invested when you're actually slugging through all the horror and stuff that you would normally see in a movie. When you're actually doing it yourself, I think it gets you far more invested in the story itself.
Yeah.
And I think, I can't remember who said this, but it might have been Will Wheaton who said that anytime that he has to try and explain video game stories to somebody who doesn't play, that he always brings up, like, if you could go to Empire Strikes Back when Darth Vader tells Luke that he's his father, and instead of jumping, you join him and see how that story plays out. And I think that's such a cool way to put it, because that kind of explains the kind of options that you have in video games and the different paths you can go. And you really can, a lot of video games, not all of them, obviously, but a lot of video games, you kind of mold your own path through the story. And those always were my favorite. Now, don't get me wrong, there are games that are like point A to point B to point A that are just as good as stories as the ones that you craft yourself. But
yeah, for sure. I've talked about it a lot on the show, but The Last of Us is always the one, my default, like, this is why using video games to tell story. This is the example of why it's so effective. Excuse me. That game was better than, and probably still is better than, like 75, 80, maybe even 85% of movies and shows that are out today.
Oh yeah. Without, I mean, there's not even a question in my mind on that percentage there, for sure.
And like, when I beat that game, I was emotionally exhausted.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
Like, I felt like I lived it, right? And
I mean, the characters in the story are exhausted, right, by the end of it. So you are left in the exact same state.
Yeah,
right.
And every aspect of that game is just. I haven't played the second one. I'm specifically talking about the first one because I've played through it. But every detail, from graphically, it's beautiful. The environment that you're in, just seeing nature overtake, all these big cities, is just beautiful. Seeing the clickers and all of the post-apocalyptic creatures that you face off against, they're wonderfully designed. The sound design is amazing and terrifying. And the voice acting is ridiculous. It's just, another Naughty Dog, thing you come to expect. Troy Baker and I forget, Ashley something or other, who voices Ellie. They're just insane and just take that whole experience to a new level. And
I wanted to
So hold on. There's one specific part in that game, like the picture I posted on our Instagram a little bit ago before we went live. When you come out of the building and you're walking through and you look over and you just see the giraffes.
Oh man, don't even get me started on that part of that. That's like one of the only times I've ever teared up in a game.
Yeah,
is that part right there.
It was so crazy because it's just you're walking by CGI giraffes in a video game, but like after the journey you've just been through, you're like, oh my gosh, this is breathtaking and beautiful. And then they have a moment, the characters there, and you're right. I was like, oh
yeah, it's
feels
just right. It's just something it's just something you're not going to get out of a movie or a TV show, because it's the horrors that you went through to get to that point, and then it's like this short, peaceful moment where you're just, you don't have clickers running after you and people shooting at you and chaos all around you. So yeah, that's a perfect example of the way that video games can hit you emotionally, and it's because of everything you went through getting to that scene. Yeah. Whereas I feel if they do that scene, let's say in the HBO series that they're making, it might not have the impact that it does in the game. Now, they might find a way to make it as impactful, but I feel like you actually doing the work and going through these horrors in the game is what makes you so emotionally unstable when you get to that scene.
That's a good word, unstable. But yeah, sorry to interrupt you, Nick. What were you gonna say?
No, you're good. I was interrupting you. But no, yeah, I mean, even we've said this before, like even if they just went frame by frame the video game into the series, I think that would be their best bet of recapturing that moment just for the viewer. Because the classic like Halo, when they switch to over the shoulder and they do the flyover and you get to see the big panoramic of a huge scene going on, like those kind of moments. I feel like if they execute that in the show, they might be able to you have to literally have the game feel for those moments to hit right. You have to have those cinematic shots in that like transfer from like first person shooter to that, the panoramic scene. So those would be tricky. But I was thinking about that quote that you said, Chad, and we can get into it later, but like even from like a developer's standpoint, like making story driven games, you don't have to choose a definitive ending or story. You can make multiple story arcs in games, which you cannot do with movies or shows unless you do the interactive ones, but at that point it's a game.
Right, exactly. That's exactly how I feel. Those are just games, and nobody really wants to say it because there's actors in there, but there's actors in video games too. So it's just it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think they're cool, and I'm a big fan of anything that gets more people into gaming. So if that's a way that people get into gaming, then I'm happy for it. But yeah, I think that the thing that seems to be, and we might have talked about this on the show, the thing that seems lost on Hollywood as far as adapting video games is they just changed the entire thing. Like there's very little video game movies that are really true to the actual video game.
Yeah.
And the one that I've brought up before is Resident Evil. I was hyped for that. And like watching him, like what?
Yeah.
Like there's some stuff here, but not enough.
So bad.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I mean, the sad part is the template is the game. Like Hollywood doesn't need to really write a script or storyboard or do a lot of that. It's there in the game. Play the game, put human actors, recreate the sets, do whatever you need to do, but just make it the same thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They definitely Hollywoodify things because if it's like an action game, or they turn everything into like with video game movies, they turn everything into like an action movie for some reason, or what
I think that they think that that's the best way to convey a video game when a lot of the top video games that have the best stories, some of them aren't even action games. So it's not an action thing that you need to. And I get that some of these directors like want to put their own spin on it, and I'm fine with that. But as long as your spin doesn't completely unwind everything that you're, the base that you have laid down with the video game. So
yeah. I'm anxious to see what the new Resident Evil stuff is going to be.
I don't know, man. I'm pretty excited. They put that that screenshot of Raccoon City Police Department. I was like, oh my gosh, this looks sweet. But
they can't get it wrong twice, can they?
I mean, certainly they can.
Yeah. Yeah. How many Resident Evil movies were there with Mia there? It was like 6 or 7.
And there's like maybe one of them that is like tolerable.
Yeah.
And that's it. But when I read the like synopsis of the new, I think, is it a Netflix show that they're doing? Is that what the Resident Evil thing is?
There's a movie and there's a series on Netflix, and
right.
I think we had an article in one of our newscast episodes, but it was one of the first ones, so the details are slipping me. But
I feel like it was like,
I think they interweave a little bit.
I'm hoping that's it, because the synopsis is like 30 years after the T-virus outbreak, the New World Order is taken. I was like, oh my gosh, it sounds just like the movies. Like, I don't want that, But then the pictures came out, and I was like, okay. And some of the actors that they chose, I was like, I can see it. But
yeah, I'm excited to see what happens there. But back to Tom's point about survival horror, and like more specifically,
Dante's Inferno, that game freaking rules.
I never played that one, but the one that comes to mind for me is the first Dead Space game. I thought that story was really fascinating, and again, all of the small details, like the sound design in that game, is like, that's really what puts that game over the top for me in terms of how scary it is. Because for the most part, I don't recall there being much music. Like, I feel like it's a lot of silence, and then you hear like metal scraping or like footsteps or like weird noises, and then that game is so stressful.
That becomes the music.
Yeah,
like, it's just the background is just the constant humming and clinking of the ship and all the stuff in it.
And it just, again, that stuff also works in movies and shows, but since you are in control of the character, and by extension you are the person in that scenario, because you're the one moving and making the decisions, it immerses you to such a degree that like that game seriously is very stressful for me.
Oh yeah, definitely. Any horror game is, and it, I mean, we've said it a million times. It's because you're there and you're actually living the horrors instead of just watching a character go through the horrors. That can be scary also, but it's just a whole different level when you're actually in control of the character. Yeah. I'm actually excited because I think the Dead Space creators are making a new sci-fi survival horror game, and I can't for the life of me remember. I think it's called like something Protocol, Callisto Protocol, maybe. And they showed a trailer, I don't know, one of these press conferences, and it looks really good. So I'm excited that they're returning to that, because those games are awesome. And I feel like survival horror for the most part is kind of lost today. We have some games coming out, but some of them are remakes of old survival horror games that, I just feel like that genre is a little lacking. But
right. No, it's one of my favorite genres for sure. And yeah, there hasn't really been too much recently, but
that was a sweet spot when those were being made. That was kind of, that was, there was a lot of good games in that niche of time there, where we were in between like the graphics ramp up where everything exploded there, but people were being smart with how they created games. Like, they leaned heavy into the sound on that game.
Well, yeah, you got like, Silent Hill and Resident Evil 2, like right around that time, like kind of pioneer that genre. But then I think over time, everyone couldn't resist the urge to turn their games into action games. I mean, that's what happened with Resident Evil. At
exactly.
Least, that time, like 6 rolls around, you're just playing a third-person shooter.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is, and I think they felt the consequences of that, because those games did not review well, and they're not very good. I mean, they have their fans, but when they brought Resident Evil 7 back and went back to the survival horror roots, I mean, it kind of baffles me when some of these companies change these things And then they come back to it and they're like, oh my goodness, we didn't know this is what people wanted all this time. It's like, what rock are you living under? That's what everybody is saying. Bring back the survival horror in Resident Evil,
Right.
Bring back the statistical RPG in Final Fantasy. We don't want action RPGs out of it's just really bizarre. And I don't know if it's like maybe a language issue because most of these studios are Japanese or what it is, but it's like they just don't. It's like they're just so checked out of the community that it shocks them.
Yeah, it's hard though because I mean, as these small indie companies grow and they become bigger, there's more company aspects of things that get driven. So people start looking at like the numbers on things, right? So obviously, what is just by the numbers, just popular across the board, first-person shooters, and they have been, but for a completely different reason. Everyone that plays those, or the people that play those in other games, they don't want everything to be a shooter. This as much as the people just that play RPGs don't want it to just be a shooter.
Right. Right.
So it's tricky, but yeah, that's been a bad plague the past like 10 years. I think we're coming out of it a little bit.
Yeah, I think we are too, because I think like Square Enix is starting to come out with some pretty good old JRPGs like they had in the 90s. The Resident Evils are getting back to it. So I think we're coming out of it, and they're starting to maybe listen to the community a little bit more, which makes sense if you're a company. But
yeah, there was a game that came out, I think it was maybe a year or two ago, called Soma. Maybe it's older than that, but like I haven't played it, but it looks to be trying to recapture that vein, of the older survival horror games. I mean, anything where you're trapped at the bottom of the ocean or under, like that just automatically freaks me out.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, let's go on to our next comment here. This one comes in from our buddy Limes314 from Discord. This is a big one, so find a chair, get comfy. He says, video games have been trying to perfect immersion as long as they started being able to add more pixels to a frame. I think storytelling has grown out of that in addition to just being another medium to tell stories through. It seems like a natural progression to try and tell stories in a way that lets you combine visual, sound, and interactability in any style you can dream up. A problem with that, though, is sometimes a developer will focus too much on either story or gameplay and neglect the other. Alternatively, sometimes a game will have a good story and good gameplay, but they are totally separated. Like all the story happens in cutscenes and the gameplay just fills in, like connect the dots. A great story game has both intertwined with one another. Last Day of June had a good story, and for the most part, the gameplay merged with it. But because it was basically a puzzle game, it can break the flow and make you feel like an idiot when you can't find the solution. Portal 2 used dialogue and supporting characters to weave together a story of the present while using visual elements to explain the past, both coming together with gameplay to tell a complete story and didn't have the protagonist say one word. Minimalism has been the friend of the indie devs, and you get games like To the Moon, which is heavier on the story but has enough gameplay to keep you engaged if you don't mind reading your game. Or Thomas Was Alone, a puzzle platformer that somehow gets you to and from an gets you to form an attachment to geometric shapes. This has been a not so brief analysis from Luke. Sorry for the word vomit. Well, thank you, Luke. Appreciate it. But you do make some good points that we could probably dig into here.
Yeah, he does. I think one of the good points that he makes, and this might be kind of the downside, if there is a downside to storytelling in video games, is the part where he said, like, if you get stuck on a puzzle, it can make you feel like an idiot, and that can kind of throw a real, that can throw you into a loop because you're trying to get through the story, and if you get stuck on something, it's almost like watching a movie and it just keeps skipping the same scene over and over, and you can't figure out why. You know what I mean? So I can understand where that could be a downside to storytelling in video games, but
this happens to me a lot, especially as I get older and I don't have infinite amounts of time to try to beat something, right? That's just too hard. But it doesn't happen to me with puzzles. I like the hard puzzles in games. But when there are boss fights that are just a hair too hard, I'm bumping that difficulty down and then just doing I did that with Fallen Order, just because I was like, I'm not wasting my time trying to fight these stupid creatures. I want to move on with the story because it's that good.
Yeah, that definitely is a pitfall with gaming and storytelling, is like, if you get stuck on a part, or if you're OCD like me and you feel like you have to like find all the collectibles and 100% levels and whatnot, you definitely have to, there's some form of suspending your disbelief, right? Because things like that, maybe the RPG elements of like leveling skills or things like remind you that, oh yeah, I'm playing a game.
Right. Yeah.
But if you're able to kind of not let that break your immersion of the actual story that's being told, you can kind of go around.
That's where they have story mode in a lot of games now, where it either removes or really dies down the difficulty.
And sometimes they'll even remove your HUD, all your stuff on screen,
like an immersion mode.
Yeah.
I think that I think the other thing too, though, is to go against that point is like it also gets you more invested in the story if you're stuck on a puzzle or stuck on a boss fight and then you finally beat it and you're moving on and you're more invested in what's going on because you died 30 times and you're frustrated and you got all kinds of emotions coming out, so you're a little more into it than if you just skip right through it, or but I do that too. I've bumped down many difficulties to get through a puzzle or a boss. So
I have that issue with like story driven RPGs, so like Fallen Order, or anything that's kind of the button clicking, those kind of games where the boss fights are very like pattern oriented with
like quick time events you're talking.
Stuff like that. Whereas things like Horizon Zero Dawn, like I'll play that on the hardest difficulty and have no problem with that. But those are a little different. Like those open world ones, it's the linear ones that I have trouble with when I'm stuck on a boss linearly versus the open world ones.
Well, I think the big gap between storytelling as far as single player games and open world games is some open world games are very linear and it's just the way that they're designed. But I think the problem with storytelling in an open world game is that the storytellers can't account for every story that you're going to make in their open world that has nothing to do with the actual story that they're telling. So a lot of games that have an open world can kind of get muddled down as far as the story goes. And I think one of the companies that perfected it would be Rockstar with Grand Theft Auto 5, in the way that they kind of embrace the stories that you're going to tell in that open world and kind of mold it all together. So I don't know. I love open world games, but they're not the tip top of storytelling, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that branches off into a whole other type of storytelling that we can get into that now or later or in an entire different episode if you guys want. But I love how it's not, video games aren't just a great medium for narrative storytelling by the creators, right? They have the whole level of player driven story, like especially if you're playing like an MMO or some kind of multiplayer game, like like I've talked about Dust 514 before, or like what we're doing now with Valheim with the podcasts and our dedicated server and stuff. There's like a loose story in Valheim, right? But we're just like making our own story by like building our own little Viking civilization. And like games like World of Warcraft, like you obviously have the storyline in the game with the quest line and the lore of all the expansions and stuff, but you also have player guilds and you have PvP and you have like guilds competing against each other. And you can the player base can form their own metagame, like within the game or even outside of the game. And again, that's just another, in my eyes, extremely positive thing that comes along with playing video games, especially like if you like playing with your friends.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that whole rabbit hole that we could go down. But.
I mean, I'll say on that rabbit hole, when it definitely comes to things like Valheim, things like Rust.
Yeah, that's another good one.
Those games are nearly, I would say they're Rust is probably 95% player and other player driven stories, because some of my best experiences in that game are completely organic from the psychopaths that play that game with you. And they're great little, they're not long stories. They're like little short stories of just like despair, pain, and death.
Murder, serial killers, robbery.
Then in like Valheim, right? There's, we're all playing on a server, and I think we all each have this little bit of a shared meta story of like, we're putting a fort down here, we're deciding to settle this area over here, but it's like this organic thing amongst everybody. So
yeah, it's great. I mean, Nick is the server VDOT, like he's the head engineer of the Viking Department of Transportation. He's out there just building roads from fort to fort with his little shovel and his little cart. It's great. That's right.
Someone's got to do it.
Someone's got to do it. That's right. Oh man. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. It's just fun. Everything about it is fun.
Like Chad said with GTA 5, they take a super unique approach to things where they somehow capture the organic nature of how that game kind of comes together, and it's where you least expect it, where you're in a scene and you're actually doing the story, and they reference something that you've done in the world that's completely unrelated.
That's cool.
Just like, you're in the story and they're like, oh, whatever burned down or whatever. The radio is the one cool thing. Like the one station that's talk radio, they like talk about the things that are going on, and you're like, oh, I just did that. Whoops.
Right.
That's funny.
That's what kind of separates Grand Theft Auto, and actually Spider-Man kind of did that too. Yes. Where you would like, if you like swing past a crime scene, J. Jonah Jameson would have a caller saying, "I saw Spider-Man go past a crime and he didn't help at all," and so cool. So that's the way to do an open world game. It's hard to not have that in an open world game and get players as invested as you want them to be for the story, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Horizon Zero Dawn, the way they approach it is they don't get too detailed into the actual events of another story in the world that you've done, but they reference it. So they in a very light way address that issue that those games can run into, which is nice and which is just enough. Sometimes it's a little not dead on, but it gets you close.
Right.
Yeah. I still need to play Horizon.
There's so many games that you need to play, but you're just never going to get to them. Let's be honest.
No.
Mike likes just one needle at a time.
Yeah, right.
Hey, I only got so many veins, right?
Needle.
Man, sidebar. So before we got on, I was like, I got to tidy up the desk. I got to get my light, I got to get a drink. As you can tell by my empty coaster here.
You didn't get a drink, yeah.
I forgot my drink upstairs.
I got two
and I'm very sad because I'm so thirsty. Oh man. But yes. I think we got two more comments here on Discord. And then we had a couple from Facebook, but those comments from Facebook, they just listed their favorite narrative-driven games. So we'll save those ones to the end.
There you go.
But our lead artist here, OG BB8, the one and only Bianca, always coming in with straight fire, answering our questions in Discord. This one, she actually broke out. Apparently, when I asked the question, I asked 3 different questions, and she like broke out and bolded each question. And
Yeah, she literally answered all 3 of them in separate sections.
So if there was, if we were having a contest for the best Discord response, which, hey, you never know, we might do that at some point.
You've won.
She would win.
Yeah,
you win.
Reigning champion.
Gold star for B. But yeah, so we'll just start from the top. Is storytelling in gaming in a good place? She says, I believe so. It seems like the writers and developers are continuously trying to think about how to make the experience more immersive for the player, and having a strong storyline is another layer to this. It perpetuates emotional investment in the objective and allows the player to put themselves in the shoes of the character. Obviously, the gameplay is the most influential factor on whether I enjoy a game or not. But if a game has fun mechanics and a strong storyline, it makes it that much better. Hard agree. It's hard to pick out anything incorrect in that.
Right.
So kind of to our earlier point, right, detriments to that. So if a game is too hard, and we're not even talking difficulty, if the mechanics suck, that's going to kill it really quick. Or if it's buggy, anything like that. So like, I think we can all agree that, the best storytelling games are the most polished games.
Yeah.
Though I would like to find an example where that is not the case.
But I mean, that parallels with books or movies or comics. Like if a movie or a show isn't shot well, or
true,
if a book is too wordy or too clunky of a read, or a comic jumps around too much, like, I mean, it's a similar thing. There's things in each medium that will pull you out of the story.
Right. Very true. Yeah. I think that video games maybe have more things that would pull you out of the story than the average movie or book, just because of the bug thing. And
you can sit through a bad movie just for the point. I don't know if I can force myself to play a bad game.
Right. and I think that's why we always come back to Naughty Dog games, because they nail exactly what Nick just said. They're polished. They're always polished. So I think that is a key component to telling a good story, is making sure that your mechanics are good and your game is polished and ready to go. And if you have to delay it, just delay it, because I'd rather play it 2 years from now when it's polished than try to force my way through it, 6 months before it should have come out. So
right. Yeah. To your point, obviously video games suffer much more than movies, books, etc., when it comes to things like that, because again, like we established earlier, you are controlling the story. So if you literally cannot progress the story because of bugs or terrible gameplay mechanics, like obviously that is a big stinker and is not going to let you actually experience the story at all.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, while we're talking, you guys try to think of a game that that actually had a good story, but actually sucked as a game.
Game sucks, but the story was great.
Yeah, I'll try to think.
So she then answered, why are video games a good medium for storytelling? She says, as mentioned, I think video games are a great medium for storytelling due to their immersiveness. As long as the gameplay is good, if the gameplay is trash, a good story can get overshadowed by a bad experience. From an art design perspective, she is an artist after all, the visual aesthetic of a game can really help portray the moods, textures, styles, and atmosphere of a story. Sometimes with other mediums, these things tend to be fleeting moments. Artists play a huge role in bringing a story to life visually, while developers take those ideas and make them as immersive as possible. This collaboration is unique to gaming, and I think it's why game-based stories feel so special. Another thing, I like how some franchises are using games as a way to elaborate on existing stories. I'm going to steal a line from you, Chad. We'll just put a little pin right there.
I knew it was coming.
I had to do it eventually.
You're right.
It's been so long. But her example is Jedi: The Fallen Order. It provides additional layers to stories we already know and love through the immersive experience of that gaming gives us. I think this makes the overall universe that much richer. Again, couldn't have said it better myself.
Right.
At the end of the day, good story. We just want to be in that world, in that story. So,
yes. But we're quickly getting back to that pin. Another one of my points is, I love how games can potentially continue or create new storylines in existing franchises. So my example actually was The Fallen Order. Like, I would love to see Cal's journey continue on in the live action Star Wars universe, and with people like Filoni and Favreau at the helm of Star Wars currently, like, that doesn't seem like an impossible thing to happen, right?
True.
But The Fallen Order, which, by the way, I've completed it since my Valheim addiction started, so I have beat it. Cool. I got through it. It's a really cool story. I loved it. Super fun. But like, that game builds off of an already established Star Wars happening event in lore, right? Order 66, and tells a unique story with a unique character revolving around that event that's already established in the movies and shows. And at the end of the story, you're left with Cal as a character that can just slot right into any live action Star Wars thing.
I got to be honest with you. You guys, I assume, are caught up on The Mandalorian, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I was kind of hoping that at the end of The Mandalorian,
it would have been
that
Cal.
scene. It would have been Cal. I was really hoping that it was going to be Cal. I thought that would have been so cool, and I would love to see, because the actor that plays Cal literally looks exactly like Cal does in the video game. So it's literally like, they have to do. I mean, they have an actor and everything.
The fact that is done, I mean, obviously it's a common thing, right? Especially like cartoons, like a lot of times the animation looks like the voice actor. But the fact that his resemblance is so identical to the game, they're going to do it. They have to.
Yeah, I think they have to too.
And especially, like, I'm not familiar with his like acting career, right? But I'm not sure if voice acting is like his main thing, if he's done a ton of it.
I don't think that it is. I know that he's on Shameless. I think he was on Gotham, I think, too.
He was the Joker guy, Jerome, or something.
This may have been
God, he is.
Yeah, you're right. Yep. So this might have been his first voice acting job, and I can't remember hearing of him in anything else. I could be wrong at that, but
he can act, though.
But I mean,
like
that selection alone, like selecting not a veteran voice actor, right, and actually a somewhat up and coming live action actor, and then modeling the character like 99% off of his real life appearance, like, that just seems a little too coincidental. Like,
that's what I was going to say.
Something up their sleeves,
right?
Or at least, I have my fingers crossed, because, like you were saying, Chad, when we got to that point in season 2 of The Mandalorian in our companion series, we did some heavy speculation, and one of the names that we threw out was Cal from Fallen Order.
Yeah,
and that just, I mean, that would have been so cool. Like, what happened at the end of season 2 was cool, but like, also it's like, can we get one of these side, like,
it was the easy button cool.
Exactly.
The easy button.
That's the perfect way to put it. It was the easy button cool. There were so many cooler options I think they could have picked, but
if they wanted to be a little bit more adventurous, Cal would have been the better choice, because that would have forced people to go play the game.
Right.
Because they're going to be like, who is this guy? I don't know. I'm going to go play the game that he's from.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, like, sticking with Fallen Order, well, first off, I want to say to anyone that's watching our live stream, you can now see exactly what I look like when I podcast. I'm always flinging my hands around and playing with my microphone stand. I'm a very fidgety person. So if you're watching the live stream and you've ever listened to the audio versions of our podcast before, and you've heard like clunks and like things shuffling around and me hitting my microphone stand,
now you know.
You understand why. But no, not only does the Fallen Order pull from the Order 66 storyline, but like they pull in established characters from the Star Wars cinematic universe. Like, I don't want to get too spoilery, but you know, you have Saw Gerrera pop up, and that's like pretty early on in the game, so I feel okay saying that. I won't say the other. But again, like being able to draw from an already established franchise and then have the potential to build on it and have the live action side continue the story that you just played in the game, like, is such a cool possibility for me.
Right.
The issue that, well, it's not an issue. It's actually a really good issue to have. But to transition a character like Cal, who's in the video game and has some pretty sweet lightsaber skills, they are going to have to show that in the movie.
Yeah. I got a fun little snippet on that. When I watched an interview with him. When he went in, he did not know that he was auditioning for a Star Wars anything. I don't know how you don't know what you're auditioning for. I don't know if they were trying to hide it, I assume.
They usually hide those things.
They gave him a lightsaber during the thing to see if he could do any kind of martial arts stuff, and he actually did. A majority of the stuff that you see in the game is actually him doing it. So he's nice. Got a martial arts background. So I mean, now that we're talking about it, it's like almost a certainty that they're going to do this. Yeah. Like they picked this kid. He looks the same.
We just want it for the mocap. We want the mocap to be accurate.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they're not going to tell him. They're not going to tell him he's going to be in a show or movie in the future. But they're like, hey, we need to check all these boxes. Can't say why, but everyone knows. Yeah,
I can't remember. I think that they didn't hand him like a lightsaber at first, but they handed him like a stick and asked him to, do a couple things, and he was like, "This kind of feels like Star Wars." And then they handed him a lightsaber. He's like, "Okay, this is Star Wars."
Yeah. The casting director is like, "Hello there." He walks in. Oh man, but yeah, can you guys think of any other examples of video games? Well, I guess you can look at like the Batman Arkham series or the Spider-Man series, but other examples of games continuing a legacy or a storyline of a live action property, or the other way around, or like an intermingling of the two.
The weaving in and out, which we're kind of talking about here, is where it goes from game to live action to game. I can't really think of any, I mean, at least in a linear sense, right? I don't even know if the Spider-Mans are necessarily linear in the same story, right, with the other media.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know about the Spider-Man games, but I know that it's not like the Batman games picked up from like the animated series or a Batman movie and continued forward. But
I mean, that's exactly how Spider-Man is too. It's like a different universe per se. So I think that I had a game and now I cannot. It just slipped my mind completely.
Nice.
All right, let me think here. I had a point, but now I forget.
No, it's cool. Keep thinking. I will say that the Batman games, again, like I haven't played the Spider-Man games, regrettably. But one thing that the Batman games did that is cool. I mean, Batman has such a deep pool of lore, right? I mean, the comics have been around since like the 30s or 40s or something. So like you have decades and decades and decades of stories and villains and characters and sidekicks and other heroes and stuff. But one of my favorite things about playing the Arkham series was just like all the little Easter eggs that they hide in the game, and like all the, I don't know, all the different villains you get to like come up against that you've seen or read in comics or seen in movies, and you're like, oh cool, now I get to like fight Bane, or I get to like actually fight the Joker or something. And the story in the Arkham series, at least Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, was a really cool experience in and of itself, coupled with the gameplay of being able to glide around Gotham City as Batman and like sit on gargoyle statues and stealth take out people. And I wish there would be more like game adaptations of movies or shows.
Yeah, I think that you'll probably see some more of that in the future, especially when we like with shows like Game of Thrones and that stuff. They're kind of prime for video games, and we talked about that on our, what video games would make good movie adaptations or whatever we did. Was it the other way around? TV shows would make good video games?
You're right up there.
Yeah. The one that I was thinking of kind of going the other way and continuing a video game was the Castlevania anime, which is continuing a seemingly dead franchise in an anime, and a pretty good anime if I say so. The last Castlevania game that came out with, I think it was like 2014, 13 maybe. So they're continuing it on a different medium, which is cool because it keeps the spirit of it alive, and maybe the hopes of getting another one in the future a little more probable if people really latch onto the anime, which I believe they have. So
yeah, they should do it in that style, or like a Dante's Inferno kind of style, like just like a different art direction. That would be really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I think the problem is Konami is just like not having video games right now. Like they want nothing. They're like busy making slot machines or something ridiculous, which sucks because they have Castlevania and Silent Hill and Metal Gear Solid. I mean, they have awesome franchises that they're just doing nothing with. And Silent Hill's Capcom, isn't it? Is Silent Hill Konami or Capcom?
Couldn't tell you. But rip Norman Reedus, Silent Hills, PT, rest in peace.
Right. Yeah, okay. It is
when it came out.
I second guessed myself for a second. I don't know why I did that. I'm usually right on my studios, but so, yeah, that's another franchise that like had an awesome running from the late 90s to the early 2010s, and it's just dead, and they're just stuck over at Konami, and it sucks because those are like some of my favorite franchises. So
yeah, for sure. All great points, and she has one more to make. So the last part of the question was, what are some of your favorite story-driven games? And she has Halo 1 through 4, Gears of War 1 through 3, Portal, Tony Hawk's Underground, which I don't recall the story there, but I wish that she was in our chat right now to elaborate on that, because I would love to hear that.
I mean, she's seemingly a pretty big Xbox fan, by the looks of it. Is that true?
Yep.
Yes, okay. You would be correct.
Because those are like, I played all those games and I wouldn't necessarily put any of them on my list of good stories, but that's just me personally.
Hey, if you don't have those Sony exclusives, you're really missing out.
It really is true.
I mean, call back to Gears of War. I mean, even Halo, but Gears of War, that is one of those games where you feel it. It's like those really intense moments of The Last of Us, but all the freaking time. Yeah. And they do a really good job at kind of like, meatheading it up and just getting you in that like macho mode where you're like, we are about to take these chainsaw assault rifles and just go fuck some shit up. Or, and then the unique over the shoulder third person camera angle, and like when you're running and like you're just this big, just huge, heavy person just running with all this gear, like you feel it for some reason, and like you're just exhausted after sprinting in that game from mobs and mobs.
I remember playing that, and like you're right, you feel your movement and like the combat, like it's very
That game is
visceral.
That game does an excellent job at using the camera, right, in and out of cinematics and in and out of gameplay moments. Like when you chainsaw something in half, like the camera angle switches and you're like, it's like the top up and you just see him drill through it. So, that's a very unique application of just like game design or mechanics there, right? And how the camera's used to just really throw you on a spin for it.
Yeah.
Probably, and I mean, to me, that's like an evolution of how they're like Doom, right? Obviously, they made that into a movie, but the movie, used the classic like Doom first person run through there at the end, right? And that's what everyone loves about that. So,
she also has also not a franchise I would typically rave about in regards to storylines, but I really enjoyed the Call of Duty Cold War campaign.
I gotta point that out real quick. I feel like, first let me comment on Gears of War real quick. I could never really. I tried my hardest to get into Gears of War, and I just, for whatever reason, I couldn't do it. Halo 1 through 3 are awesome. Obviously, Halo 1 was revolutionary. But the Call of Duty campaigns, I think they're widely underrated. And I think it's because it's mostly a multiplayer game, and most of the people that are buying Call of Duty aren't even playing the campaign. And you saw the studio respond to that by a couple of them didn't even have single story campaigns. But the newest Modern Warfare, the one that came out before Cold War, that campaign is awesome. Like, it's one of the best military games that I've ever played. It's super cool. So I think those games to me have always been underrated as far as their stories. And I think it's just because they kind of get lost in the multiplayer.
Yeah. That's so funny you said that, because I literally was about to say, like, the shooter games, they just get overlooked because most people just consider those strictly multiplayer, even though they all have campaigns. But like you said, the majority of people are buying it to play team deathmatch with their friends or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, that got taken too far though, that idea, when the first remake of Battlefront, no campaign, it was an issue.
People got a little mad about that.
I feel like it's weird because the stories kind of get overshadowed when it's a multiplayer game, but then when they're not there, everybody freaks out like they want them, but you're not even playing the ones on the other ones. So what, I can get why a studio cuts that out of multiplayer stuff, but you gotta keep your games open to everybody, and not everybody, including myself, play multiplayer games, all the time. So I've bought probably 80% of the Call of Duties and beat all the campaigns and played very little multiplayer. I used to play Call of Duty 4 and that stuff back in the day, but you can't cut it out of your game. It's just, it is what it is. You got to have two teams. One's working on multiplayer, one's working on a story. If it sucks, it sucks, but at least it's there. And you're,
I mean, they all started off though as story-driven games before multiplayer was a thing. So I just don't think they can ever drift away from that. They need to keep that there, because, I mean, if someone tells me like, listen, you gotta play Call of Duty, whatever the campaign is for whatever shooter game, I'll play it because I like first-person shooter campaigns. And then once I play that, I'm probably more likely to play some multiplayer. Whereas if it's purely like, I just feel like the Black Ops, or like you said, the ones that don't have campaigns, I'm never going to buy them. I'm never going to play them because I'm not just going to sit there and play multiplayer.
Right. And I think it's kind of key too, because like back when I played Call of Duty, like if I was doing really bad online, I would go play the single player, and it can kind of feel a little bit better about myself because I'm slaughtering the easy, AI. But
story mode, I am awesome.
Right. But if that's not there, then I'm going to get frustrated and go to play a different game. So I think it keeps the people in your game that might be leaving your game because they're getting frustrated, where you could keep them, at least on the.
You ever do a story mode in Uncharted?
Say that again?
You ever do story mode in Uncharted?
Did I ever do story mode in Uncharted? Or
Yeah.
you mean multiplayer?
You mean multiplayer in
No,
Uncharted?
story mode.
I mean, isn't that what everyone plays in Uncharted?
No. There's a story mode setting where there's no combat.
Oh! The setting.
Is?
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Where there's no combat?
Yeah,
at least in like 2 or 3, not 1, but I think 2 or 3 they started doing that.
Huh. Interesting.
So like that would be the ultimate like I'm mad at the multiplayer. I'm just gonna go play like easy story mode.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that I think that games are doing that more frequently now, where they're not making it just a setting that you put on and then you don't have to do anything violent. They're giving you options to go through some of these violent games like The Last of Us without being violent at all, which I think is kind of cool. If that's what's holding you back on a game is how violent it is, that you can actually experience the story without doing any of it. So I think it's a kind of a cool idea.
It's definitely interesting. I mean, there's
a cutscene that says lots of violence, and then next
everything just turns blurry for a second.
Yeah.
But man, if you remove the violence, how do you end that game?
You don't.
Man, let me tell you.
It plays it for you.
I thought this is how terrible of a person I am. So, Nick, have you played and beat the game?
Which game?
Last of Us, the first one. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So, I'm pretty sure you can just run out of the room when you get Ellie, right? But like, I'm such a terrible person that I shot both doctors in the head.
I straight murdered everybody in that place. And I mean, at that moment, you want to.
I was so angry.
But after, like, this is something that I feel like never gets talked about, The Last of Us and Joel specifically. I can't think of a more despicable character that I've ever played in a video game than Joel. And a lot of people look at me like I'm crazy when I say that, but he literally screwed all of humanity over because he had like a daughter get killed and saw Ellie as a daughter. And I feel like that's just like, it's awful.
Yeah, but then at the same time, you're also like, I get it.
But I'm also murdering all the doctors, and I kind of feel for him. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. That's the sign of a great story. Like I say that a lot to Beck when we watch, our superhero movies or whatever, or any movie that has a villain, which was pretty much every movie. But like, when you get the good villains that you're like, man, I really hate that person, but like, I get it.
That's why I like The Boys so much.
Yeah.
It's just full of villains. They're all like bad guys.
Yeah, you look at that and you look at like Killmonger and Black Panther. Like, I get it.
Right.
Great villain. He's a
absolutely.
great villain. Even Thanos in the MCU, like, I kind of get it. Like, I kind of understand. Like, I hate him, but there's like a shred of that kind of makes a little bit of sense.
Right.
I would never do it, but like,
right.
Yeah, like the whole when he like just like tossed Gamora like in, like I was like, yeah, I mean, at that point in my Thanos life, that's where I'm at.
This far, I mean,
that's where I'm at with this. Like,
right.
Well, I guess we're gonna turn around. Sorry. But yeah, like, that's a great point. Joel is a terrible human.
He really is. He's literally the most despicable character that I've ever played in a video game, and it kind of gets lost. And I think that's something that's lost in The Last of Us 2. And I'm not going to spoil anything because I really want you guys both to play The Last of Us 2 so we can talk about it. But it's just like, he's just terrible. He does terrible, awful things through the whole story, and then screws the entire human race at the end. So it's like,
Thanks, Joel. What a guy. Right. Oh man, I don't even remember where I was going to go after that, but that was a good little sidebar there. You got any more points, Nick, or are we ready to move on to the last Discord comment?
No, I think I just need to play Gears of War again. It keeps coming up.
Yeah. Bianca, if you're listening, if you're in the chat right now, please elaborate on the story of Tony Hawk.
If you
listen to this at a later date, just explain yourself in Discord.
I think if it's the one that I'm thinking of, you read the next one. If it's the one that I'm thinking of, it's probably the best Tony Hawk story, but I have to make sure it's the one that I'm actually thinking of.
Okay, you dig into that. Our last Discord comment actually comes from Mel, who is a newcomer. She, I believe, just joined Discord yesterday or the day before. So welcome. Thank you for making yourself at home and jumping in the discussion right away. Really appreciate that. But she says, I don't have an answer beyond what any of the others have said, but I would like to add that one thing that can either completely pull me out of a story or make it unenjoyable is bad voice acting. Hard agree that like you're speaking my language right there.
Yeah, definitely.
For example, in the Mass Effect trilogy, you can play as either a male or female character, even though they are essentially the same story told in the same way. I find the game more engaging and more entertaining with Jennifer Hale voice acting the character of Shepard than I do with Mark Muir, even though about 90% of their lines are exactly the same.
Yeah. That's something that happened in Assassin's Creed Odyssey too. A lot of people you could play as a female or a male, and a lot of people lean towards the female because the voice acting on the male just wasn't there. And that's something that, I mean, that you get that same kind of stuff in movies too. If you have bad acting, you're not into it,
Right.
But Nick, how far did you get in Castlevania Symphony of the Night? Did you get to any of the voice acting in that game?
No, I haven't.
Okay, man. That game is notoriously one of the worst voice acted games of all time. And it's like going back and comparing games that were around the same time, Metal Gear and that stuff. It's like, oh my goodness, this is awful. Like it's really, really, really bad. So yeah, I definitely agree with her. I think that can really kill an experience on a video game, but I feel that we're getting less and less of that now as it's becoming a more accepted artistic form, voice acting in video games. It's not necessarily the developers, just miking themselves up and saying the lines in Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which I think is what happened. So I think it's going in the right direction, and hopefully 5-10 years from now we won't have any bad voice acting, but it's still there, very minimal, but it's still there.
Again, I'm going to repeat myself from a clip from a previous episode, but once I played Uncharted, like that's the game that made me actually care about voice acting. I was like, holy crap, like there's something about this game that just makes it so much different than any other game I've played, and that something would be a man by the name of Nolan North, who is awesome. Like the greatest voice actor, maybe, him and Mark Hamill, right there, because Mark Hamill's work as the Joker is just untouchable.
Yeah, because in Uncharted, like, when he gets frustrated or pissed or passionate about something, it seems like it's all on the character, it's all in the voice, and and even they animate that out so well with his voice acting. It just all flows so well, and you're watching a movie.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you're also falling off of trains, off of mountains, and
driving jeeps through jungles, and
doing all the crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's that again. Naughty Dog just putting work in all the small details that elevates them above the rest, in my opinion. But
yeah, I mean, I feel like we're always gonna beat that dead horse on the show because it's just they're and I've said it before, they're just so much better at it than everybody else, and I don't want to demonize the other developers. There's a lot of good developers, but Naughty Dog, I'm sorry, they're they're just outdoing you. And I was kind of, to your point on Nolan North, I really I get that he's probably, what's he, in his 40s now, 50s maybe?
A little too old.
I was hoping that he was going to play Nathan Drake in the Uncharted movie, and I think it would have been so awesome, but because I think he's an actual actor too, so he's not just a voice actor. I know he does far more voice acting than actual live action acting, but I don't know. I just thought it would have been cool. I'm hopeful for Tom Holland. I didn't see the vision really at all because I see him as Spider-Man and he'll always be Spider-Man in my eyes.
Right.
But once I saw the set photo that they showed, I was like, oh man, okay. I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they'll definitely doctor him up to look not like a teenage Spider-Man.
Right.
And
that's
true,
because in that movie he looks like he's like 14.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's in that pivotal point of his career where he's mega popular. He's about to start maturing on multiple fronts, from his his art to just personally, professionally. He'll grow into that character pretty well. I think they're gonna get it.
Yeah. I think. Go ahead.
I was gonna go back to Uncharted. So if you have something,
I'm probably still gonna be on Uncharted. So go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, story wise, I mean, all the Naughty Dog details aside of the voice acting and the mocap and the cutscenes and everything, but the stories of all of the Uncharted games are so good. Like, it's just like playing Indiana Jones. I mean, basically, right?
I think that the stories in the games are awesome. I think, and I've said it multiple times, the fourth one is the best one, and it might be because the first three always had some sort of supernatural element to it, which always kind of felt a little out of place for me. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, in my opinion. But I think that that's the perfect way to put it. It's Indiana. It's a modern day Indiana Jones. So if you're listening to this and you have no idea what Uncharted is, that's what it is. It's a modern day Indiana Jones.
Take Indiana Jones, Tomb Raider, and just smash them together.
And throw a little of the Mission Impossible movie franchise in there, as far as the action set pieces and the planes crashing and all this crazy stuff happening. It's really next level.
And so your point about the supernatural elements of it, I always think back on the explanation of 300, right, in that movie, and how you can if you have an issue with how obviously supernatural the Persians look in that movie.
You mean they're not really 14 feet tall?
Right. So one way you can look at that is from a storyteller's perspective, right? Because that movie's being told from the one character, right? He's telling the story, the tale of the 300. So the depiction of those characters, that's how the Spartans saw them, right? As monsters, as these wild, evil enemies, right? So in Uncharted, you could put a spin on that and be like, well, obviously in all of these adventures, when Nathan Drake is retelling this story, there might be some embellishments in what actually happened, or even Indiana Jones, right? I mean, there are still the natives, like in with the skulls, and was the second one, Raiders of the Lost Ark. So I mean, it's I won't say that it's completely out of place. I just feel like, I don't know. My problem now is that I compare all the back ones to 4, and 4 is like, and that's probably wrong, but I think go play 4 right now.
Yeah, I mean, you really should, because it's 4 is really cool as far as the storytelling too, because there's various things that you can miss within the game. And some of those things are like notes that you pick up of pirates that you find dead, and they're telling a story, and you'll pick up like 5, 6, 7 of these things, and they're telling the story of where they're going and what happened to them, and they fell and broke their leg, and then you find them like down with a broken leg and stuff. It's a very good meta level of storytelling in Uncharted 4, and some of the games that a lot of the games that do that, it adds a lot more context to what you're actually doing, instead of just going from story point to story point. If you're picking up these letters, Last of Us does it too. You're picking up these letters and reading them. If you're not reading them, you're still going to get a great story, but you get far more context to the story.
Yeah. Horizon Zero Dawn does that. And the great thing I love about that game is that the story to me is just utterly unique, right? And what happened to the world in that, because it's very much post-apocalyptic.
Right.
And there are tons of just like different clues and things that you find just exploring that piece together the story of what happened to the world. Because you get a lot of it through the main story arc, but by reading the stuff, reading little logs you find, or just piecing it all together, it tells a much wider story than just what the game will walk you through.
Yeah.
So I think if a game is able to capture that, right, and make actually want people to read all those little tiny, because I've been in games where there's just so many, and it's just like overbearing, and there's just like no way.
Right. Yeah, there definitely needs to be a limit to the things that you need to collect and read. I agree, and I think that's where Uncharted does pretty good. There's not a whole lot of the letters that you need to find, but they're super interesting. And I think another one that did it really well was Control, and I don't think you guys probably have ever played Control, but it builds the world out in these kind of like bureau files that you find and read, and it kind of goes against Nick's point. There's a lot of them to find. Like to 100% that game, it was a real pain, but it was worth it, because finding these things, you're getting so much more context to the story than what you're actually getting, because there are games that actually just use that as their storytelling. Dark Souls does it. They don't really tell too much story. Right. It's everything that you're, all the stuff that you're finding in the world. So,
well, that's the thing. If the story, the larger story, is intriguing enough, like in Horizon Zero Dawn, that the world was so interesting to me, I wanted to read them, because I wanted to know, like, why do things look like this? Why do things work like this? Right. So there can be as many as they want, but if they are able to get the player to interact with those things, they're just doing their job all the more better.
Right. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think that's what Control did, was it made it very enticing to go and find those things, because the world that they build is very, very interesting. So I need to go back to Horizon. I beat Horizon, but I never beat, what was the DLC, Frozen Wilds? I never beat Frozen Wilds, so I need to go back to that before the new one comes out, because
one of the few games I have 100%.
Really?
Hey, nice. Definitely waiting for that one to go on sale on Steam, because it's on Steam.
So,
right.
Just buy it.
But let's be real. I have many farms and taverns to construct right now. Many roads to help Nick finish paving. But my last point on Uncharted, and then we'll move on. Similar to Chad, how you're saying The Last of Us was one of the first games that made you kind of tear up a little bit, have a little emotional response. The Last of Us, or Uncharted, is one of the first games that had the opposite effect for me. One of the first games I remember like just laughing hysterically at, because of how funny I always awesome. Nathan Drake is in that, and like his interactions with Sully, and like all of the character interactions are so funny.
Yeah, they are. They're great characters, and it's sad to see that we pretend, I think Naughty Dog's moving on from Uncharted. Many people think that they possibly might be working on another one. I think that they've came out and said they're not. So I don't know why people think that. But the other thing was another studio might be taking it over. Another Sony studio. And I'm like, no, just leave it. If it's just not Naughty Dog,
just don't make the game.
And I will say,
it has to continue on forever.
So I will say that Uncharted Golden Abyss, which is the Vita one, was done by Sony Bend, who made Days Gone, the zombie game that came out a couple years ago. And they did an awesome job. So I'm not saying that another studio can't do Uncharted. I just would prefer I would prefer it to be Naughty Dog. And if it's not Naughty Dog, I'd probably lean towards Bend, because they did such a great job with Golden Abyss.
I felt like I was Nate's friend. Like, I'm calling him Nate. Like when when me and my buddy Ryan, who, if you're in our Discord, is Fortress Tiberius, our chief moderator. When we would play a lot of the same games all the time, talk about them all the time. We would be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go hit the sticks with Nate. Later. gonna go hang out with my boy Nate." But yeah, like
he's just a cool dude, man. He's he's an action star, and it's cool because like my kids love Uncharted, and my oldest like literally looks up to Nathan Drake. So it's cool that a video game can kind of get that kind of sense that sports stars get, and that kind of stuff that, you know, like my little kids are looking up to Nathan Drake. He's not even a real person, you know, but because of the way that it's acted and the way that it's all put together, it's just, you know, he's super cool.
For sure. So yeah, that wraps up our Discord comments, which basically is an entire episode.
Right.
But yeah, thank you to everyone who jumped in and answered our question here on the Discord. Something we do every week. At the beginning, I'll throw a question in relating to our topic, and you know, answer away. And then we talk about it, dig through it on the show.
Really drive our episodes. I mean,
really,
basically, you're a part of the episode.
Yeah, you literally drove this entire episode.
Yeah, exactly.
I do want to take a small break here and do something that I think that we should do maybe at the beginning of every one of these, and talk about what we're playing, because I know you guys want to talk about it because it keeps coming up. So I think we should talk about what we're playing at the moment. So
all right, let's start the episode. We go into clean slate. New episode,
hour and a half. You know, second half of our episode here.
Part 2.
Yeah. So do you want us to talk about Valheim? Okay, that was big question.
Yeah. Take it easy. I just want to know what you're playing and what it is. Like, you don't have to, you know, tell me your immense love for it.
You go first, Nick.
Okay. Yeah. So primarily, I've been playing Valheim with a handful of people, but it's a kind of like a Viking sandbox survival game. It's got some loose story elements in it as far as like those bosses, but the world is completely malleable. Co-op 1 to 10 players, or just completely by yourself. It's just super engaging and very addictive to all the things it lets you do, and it's a giant time sink. Building the issue is terraforming and building in that game is just incredibly accessible, and the world is your palette. So that's where I'm at. But in that same vein, actually, I picked up Stellaris on Steam, which is one of those 4X games. This one's a space one. Played a little bit of that. I think I just like skimmed the surface of it because it reminds me of Civ, as far as when you first play Civ, it seems like kind of boring and simple, but as I'm looking like through all the menus on Stellaris, looks like there's a crap load of depth that I just don't understand in mechanics yet. So eventually I'll probably dig deep into that and get real meta on Stellaris, as that game procedurally looks pretty large.
So how are you going to do that while making all of our roads in Valheim?
Yeah.
I mean, dual box.
Well, he's not Mike for starters, so he probably will get bored of Valheim eventually.
Yeah, I mean, once I achieve my growing list of goals in Valheim, I will, I'll be happy. One day I hope to log into Valheim, just hang out in my castle for like an hour, maybe take like a boat ride down the coast, just really enjoy the game. But right now there's just a ton of work to get there. There's like entire forests to strip mine and all that kind of stuff. We're going to need to build the castle, Mike. We have to like literally strip mine the whole like East Coast. So be ready for that.
Hey, put me to work.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but it's very, very fulfilling.
It's again with like the player driven like meta story thing. Like, yeah, Nick is like the mastermind behind all the construction, and I'm like the worker bee. Like, he's like, I need pine, and I'm like, all right. And then I go chop down like 30 pine trees, and I come back, and he's like, all right, I'm building this sweet wall.
I mean, on our server, there's 5 or 6 people that actively play, but we never all play together necessarily. There's always like pockets of like 2 or 3 of us playing, and at first it started off as like the first base. Then some other people made another base, right? I made a road that connected them. And then now we have like another base. So like we're slowly like developing this continent.
Yeah, that's cool.
So there's a story. We have our own little story going to it, which that's the fun part, I think. I found an island like south of us, is out in the sea, and it, one day we're gonna take that place on.
Right.
It's definitely cool. I need like a space game that's like that, where you can like terraform planets and stuff. I was really hoping No Man's Sky was going to be that game, and it never really was. And it's actually really cool. I went back to it like a month. They've really turned that game around. But
so obviously that game had a lot to live up to. Did they go in that direction, or did they kind of refine it in a different direction?
Yeah, they went in the direction that the hype was, and obviously when the game came out, it didn't meet expectations really at all. And I think for the most part, majority of the people that hated on that game have really turned around and are starting to love it, because the developers listened and they did exactly what the community wanted, and it added in all the right things. And now it's a pretty cool game. It's still, it's still kind of missing a soul, but there's a lot more there to fill that void than there was in the initial release.
That's the thing. So Valheim somehow captured that soul that those empty sandbox games often do not have. So, I mean, yeah, a space one I would absolutely love to have a space version of Valheim.
That would be dope.
They should just make a Star Wars one like that, maybe.
Oh man, that would be really cool.
where I can just be the Empire and strip planets and build Death Stars.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah, man. So, like I said a little bit ago, I beat Fallen Order finally. Super fun, loved it. I'm kind of sad that I put it off for so long. I will slowly go back and try to 100% it. I still have some exploration to do, but the story of that game is fantastic, and it was really fun to get to pretend I was a Jedi. But yeah, then it was just like Valheim. And like Nick said, so we have a dedicated server, which is not something that is readily available, it is readily available to everyone, but it's not like a feature in the game. We have like third party. We've paid for a server that we can all play on that stays active 24/7. But yeah, it's open to anyone that plays Valheim that's a part of our Discord server. So shameless Discord plug. If you haven't joined our Discord or haven't had reason enough to yet, if you want to get in on our Valheim dedicated server action, join the Discord and get a hold of me or Nick or our good friend Stonk Boy himself.
Jarl Hefe de Stonks.
That's right. But to go towards the kind of like meta game that's evolving in Valheim right now for us, like the other mic. Well, actually, there's 3 mics that play on the server, which is hilarious. But the Stonk Boy mic, he is a Stonk Boy, right? And is it his brother that plays with him?
Yeah, Vince.
Yeah, so they're both Stonk Boys, right? And they built their own little Stonk Boy fort away from, us. And then me and Nick come in and we're the show boys, right? And we kind of like one of our friends, Mod Dibs Left Hand, that we used to work with. He started playing with us, and we kind of like formed our Showboys community and made a little village. And now Showboys is making like a big fort. And, it's kind of been like a weird tension, because there's like a whole Rust thing to this game where you can turn on PvP and you can just kill each other and like destroy each other's stuff and crap. Right now, I don't think any of us have it on because we're trying to like keep the peace, but there's like a weird tension. Like the Stonk Boys locked their fort, right? But Nick was able to get in, but I wasn't able to get in. So I was like, is there some weird tension between the show boys and the Stonk Boys? And
plotting something.
Today we had a groundbreaking moment in the Valheim channel of our Discord where we actually, Trash Can Mike and myself, we decided to shake hands and partner on building a tavern together. So maybe there is no tension between the Stone and Showboys.
Or they're setting you up for a purple wedding, one or the other, red wedding,
Red wedding, yeah.
Oh, one of those green weddings. No.
Oh yeah, you never see Game of Thrones. Sorry, Game of Thrones reference.
As a member, as the lead of VDOT, I am a member of all communities, and I simply build bridges and roads to all forts. Literally.
Yeah, but it's great. Like I've created a giant sprawling carrot farm. I just live my life as a Tomb Raider / carrot farmer, as a deceased Viking trying to get into Valheim or whatever.
Part-time VDOT.
Yeah.
Goon.
Yeah, it's picking up side work where available, but
for hire.
What about you, Chad? What are you playing?
So I picked up Hitman 3.
Ooh.
And it has literally, like, League of Legends consumed my life for the past month and a half. And I am just like, I even put, like, before I got on here today, I put Metal Gear Solid in to see if I could, get the needle out. And I'm like, all I can think about now is going back to Hitman. But they're awesome, man. This new trilogy. I don't know if you guys have ever played any of the older Hitman games.
It was a long time ago.
But this new trilogy is it's so good. And the way that they do it is like, if you have all three of them, you can play all the maps within Hitman 3 with the graphics of Hitman 3 and the gear that you get and everything.
Wow.
So the first time I played the first Hitman game, it didn't really click to me because it's a game that you could beat in like 4 hours and then you're done with it. Like, you beat all the levels and you're like, what? Like, that was super short. But at the time I was like, whatever. And the second one, it clicked a little bit more. And this one, there's just so much content between all these three games that I probably could play it for another year and not finish everything. And that kind of was lost on me when I played the first one. So I don't know, man. I love them. I think, I platinumed Hitman 3. I'm trying to platinum the other two currently. But It's just that IO Interactive, the studio that makes it, is now working on a James Bond game. And like, this is Hitman is James Bond. It's like going to be such an easy transition for him. So, the only difference is he's going to have like super cool tech gadgets,
and hair.
Right? Yeah.
I could really go for a James Bond game.
Oh man, I'm super excited for it. I think it's going to turn out really well, but I think that, like, as it sits right now, this trilogy is the best James Bond game that we have because it's almost identical.
Nice.
But this is a perfect example of the kind of meta level of storytelling that I was talking about earlier, where these games have a story, but majority of the story is picked up within the level, doing different challenges and finding different ways to kill these people and finding different disguises and hearing, different stories and people talking. It's just super cool. And it's all within the game. There's very little cutscenes, but I don't know. I love it.
Haven't had a Bond game since 2012.
Right. And I think the only good Bond game was probably GoldenEye on the 64, which was like,
yeah.
Was the last one, what was it on, Nick? 2012. What would that have been? PlayStation 2, 3?
3 probably.
Yeah, because this was like Skyfall and Quantum of Solace. 360 and PC Wii U.
Yeah, see, those are like
exactly where I thought I'd see a James Bond game.
Yeah, right. Those are the movie renditions of which don't always turn out very good.
Yeah, and then it says on January 2013, Activision Steam stores removed the availability for Quantum of Solace, Bloodstone, and 007 Legends without explanation.
Weird.
And then 3 days later said that the game license was revoked.
And that's probably has something to do with IO maybe getting the license for James Bond. But I've never heard them pulling games before because somebody else got the license for it. So pretty interesting.
Activision themselves declare that they would be backing away from licensed games in a formal statement. And then the next section is hiatus and IO Interactive 2020 to present.
Yep.
Nice.
It's going to be sweet, man. And if they follow the kind of groundwork they've laid with this new World of Assassination trilogy, it's going to be so cool because it's just there. They just got to put the character of 007 in there.
Yeah, right.
So I was kind of hoping that they would get a John Wick game. I thought that made it might have lined up a little bit better, but 007's perfect, I think.
Yeah.
I forget what game it was, but I think the last James Bond game I played was on PlayStation 2, I want to say.
I think 1 or 2 I've played.
Yeah.
I can't remember much of it, but I remember playing it quite a bit.
Yeah. I like this idea, Chad. I think we'll definitely throw this on the front end of these episodes. It's a good update once a month. We only have these episodes once a month, so there is potential for a lot of video games to be played between episodes. I mean, not with me personally, but
from me, yeah, I was gonna say for me, you guys will still be playing Valheim.
So next month, we'll tell you about all of the roads we built on top of the 2 we've already constructed,
and all the red weddings we've had.
That's right. And hopefully by then they'll have added more things I can plant besides carrots on my farm.
Nope.
But yeah, so I think, let's round out the episode here because we have, a couple comments from Facebook, and I came up with a very short list of games because I couldn't quite recall exactly all of the amazing story-driven games I've played in my past because I've been so consumed by the multiplayer world as of the last 5 years because of League of Legends. But so our friend Brian Burke from Be Hero Fights podcast, he's been on our show before. Same with Tom. He says his favorite story-driven games are Cyberpunk, Ghost of Tsushima. Did I say that right?
Tsushima,
and God of War, the 2018 version.
Awesome picks. I haven't played Cyberpunk yet, but Ghost of Tsushima is fantastic, and God of War is also
resonate with you.
Definitely.
Like Chad probably loves that game.
I did start playing God of War 3 Remastered since we've last had an episode. Get my hand at that just to get a feel for it.
Yeah. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised if you play the new one in the direction that they went with God of War, because it's very, very different, and it's a very, very good direction in my opinion.
Full circle. I do have it because I picked up for $4 on the Steam store during Christmas.
That's a steal. My goodness.
And I started it, got to the first boss, too hard, turned it off.
Really? Oh man, that first boss fight's probably one of the coolest boss fights that I've ever seen in a game, I think.
Yeah, it was cool and fun, but I think I just didn't have the patience for it. So I'm probably gonna have to bump down the difficulty and just breeze. I'm gonna go to story mode in that game.
It's cool that they took Kratos and God of War and Kratos specifically, who was basically not a character. He was just a angry god that was slaughtering everybody, and made him like this emotional father figure. And they really, I think that they're kind of taking the helms from Naughty Dog as far as storytelling goes, because they really turned it around in God of War, the new one. It's like a direction you wouldn't think they would go with the series.
Right. Yeah, because Kratos was just like the embodiment of unbridled rage.
Exactly.
And he was just like a...
It sounds like a father to me. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, he was just a vessel for the hack and slash the original games were. Though great stories and a lot of fun. Those along with Dante's Inferno, I think I just like Greek epics,
right,
done in that style.
Yeah, it's unique to take it to to Norse mythology, and then to give him like the father figure thing. It's just so cool. And the other cool thing about it is it's all shot in one take. The camera never cuts away in the entire game, which I think is so cool. But I mean, be on the lookout for Santa Monica, because they're up and coming, I think, and that's weird to say because they've had a lot of good games, but they've kind of turned the corner, and I think they're going to be the next big studio.
Hey, before we get on to our last Facebook comment, Nick, to your point of like the first boss being too difficult and wanting to bump the difficulty down, I want to give a quick shout out to an old friend that I went to high school with back at Jackson. He's been streaming video games on Facebook for a while, and I watch him every morning. He streams Monday through Friday from 8 till like 9:45-ish before he goes to work. His channel's name is BioCiv, so look it up on Facebook. He's a real cool guy, really funny, entertaining stream. But he's been playing through Arkham Asylum the last couple of days again, and today he kept dying like all over the place. And at the end, he's like, oh man, I should have bumped down the difficulty. And he like paused and looked, and he's like, what? It's on normal?
That's hilarious.
I was like crying over here.
That's like the opposite of the story that I think I told you guys that my son beat Miles on the Miles Morales Spider-Man on the hardest, on ultimate difficulty. He didn't realize it till the end when he kept dying at the end boss. I like, what difficulty are you on? He's like, I'm on ultimate. I'm like, what the heck?
Duh.
He's so good at that game. I mean, he loves that Spider-Man game. So.
But you don't realize it until you get the award that says you get like all three of them because you beat every difficulty at once.
And I missed that sound of the PlayStation trophy popping up.
It's so satisfying.
But yeah, if you guys, if anyone's needing entertainment early morning during the weekdays, like check out BioCiv. His channel's funny. He's a good dude. Actually, the thing that like inspired me to get back into Fallen Order and finally beat it was watching him, because he was playing through it for the first time. So I was like, oh yeah, I need to beat this game. But yeah, good dude. Our last Facebook comment comes from Doug Beauregard II. I hope I didn't butcher your last name, but I'm pretty sure it's Beauregard.
Yep, you nailed it.
Nice. He says Mass Effect series, The Last of Us series, BioShock series, and Horizon Zero Dawn.
Here we go.
Yeah, definitely a good list. Doug's a good friend of mine, and I actually have to talk to you guys about something about him after the show. But yeah, definitely good list. He loves those Mass Effect games, man. He's always talking about Mass Effect. So
I've never played Mass Effect or BioShock, but I did just buy all the BioShock games on Steam for like $11 last week.
I'm playing, and I haven't played BioShock or Mass Effect, but I'm definitely picking up the remasters of the trilogy because I want to play them, and I feel like I kind of missed them. But
yeah, those are very worth playing.
Like Mass Effect 3 is probably like the best video game ever, right?
I mean, no.
That might be a little divisive to say that, but
for at the time, I mean, that was the game that was being talked about. That was the one like knocking down walls and just being awesome at what it was. And then they came out with Andromeda and completely robbed me of like $70 and all my happiness about that series.
I would venture to say that Andromeda almost turned me off of playing the other ones, but once that's what everybody says. Don't let it, because and we talked about it before. Andromeda just does not have a soul. It's just very bland.
I mean, I can look between the like blocks and the pixels and see the underneath of the map sometimes.
Right.
It's very upsetting. I'm walking on an eggshell and I know it.
That wraps up the listener comments. Thank you again for those of you who chimed in. You literally made the show this week, and it was super fun talking about all of your thoughts and opinions and your games. Do you guys have any specific games we haven't talked about yet that you really appreciated the narrative-centric, story-driven nature of. Like, my list is, we pretty much talked about most of them in great detail, but I had Uncharted, The Last of Us, Fallen Order, the Arkham series, and I threw World of Warcraft in there, but it's not as strong as the other ones. But it does have a very rich and deep lore. But I don't think MMO RPG gameplay really lends itself to the actual like strengths of storytelling in gaming.
If they would just make movies out of the cinematics or whatever, like they'd be all good.
Right. Yeah.
Their cinematics are so good.
Yeah. I mean, that's the story that's being told. And to the points of like MMOs and all that, those are the kind of games that drive me to go read the wikis and like read the lore on everything and learn more about the world. So I guess that's less so much an active story. Obviously the main like game campaign, the expansions and stuff drive like a story. But to me, the storytelling is found in the metadata that supports it, right? All the wiki articles that explain all the characters and all the different places and things. And that's kind of like, that's the Lord of the Rings trope, right? It's all the supporting detail that brings those stories to life.
Yeah. I mean, the same goes with League of Legends, as I've talked about before, but like for being a multiplayer only game and a MOBA at that, where you're literally like nothing in the gameplay is telling you anything. You're literally, the only thing is to beat the other team.
Yeah.
But outside of the game, like the lore for Runeterra, which is the world that League of Legends is set in, and like all the character bios and stuff, like it rivals World of Warcraft with the amount of rich lore that League of Legends has. So much so that they just recently announced the other day that they're making an MMO, which I've been talking to Nick about. You know my thoughts on this. Like, I'm screaming that this needs to happen for like the last year, but it is actually finally happening.
Cool.
They announced it. They're hiring a team. It's probably going to be a long ways away, but
MMOs just make me sad anymore. Yeah. I don't want to think about them.
Yeah, it's true. While you were talking, I was trying to look through my Steam library to see if there are any games that I should throw on there. The only one that really sticks out is Resident Evil 2. I think, the story of most of the Resident Evil games I've played, even though they've kind of drifted away from the survival horror there for a chunk of games. Even those stories were fun, at least, or entertaining. But Resident Evil 2 probably being the strongest one that I've played. Maybe Resident Evil 4 right up there with it. But what about you, Chad? You got any that we haven't talked about really that you just want to mention?
I mean, not really. I mentioned most of mine on my top 5 games. It's the same that we talked about, Last of Us. I do want to point out Witcher 3, which I thought was a fantastic story and had a lot of meta story in there. But outside of that, not really.
Sweet. Well, I think that wraps up another episode. Again, thank you to all the listeners who commented and gave us your opinions and thoughts. Just real quick, I want to do another Discord plug. We talk about it all the time, but like it's really the best place to stay on top of all things Showboys related. It's the best place to interact with us and even other listeners. We talk about everything you can imagine, being video games we're playing, video game news, what we're watching, movie and show news. We have a Valheim channel. We have a Valheim server where we play with our friends. We have, everything else, which exciting bit of news that you may have seen on our social media posts, but our friends at Be Hero Fights podcast actually have joined our Discord and have their own little channel grouping related to their podcast. So yeah, there's a lot going on there, and it's the best way to stay in contact and in touch and interact with us and the other listeners. So please join. Our Discord link is in our Facebook and Instagram bios and can be found on linktr.ee/showboyspodcast. Chad, I haven't done this any other episode that you're on, and I just realized I feel terrible. You need to plug your stuff. I mean, you write about video games at downrightcreepy.com, right?
Right. Yeah. So I write about video games on downrightcreepy.com, like you just said. Go to the gaming section. I have a couple articles there. I also do a podcast called That's Strange, where we dive into everything that's weird, controversial, or makes you think, like that. So that's strange.net is where you can find all that stuff. Check us out if you're into that kind of stuff.
Yeah, please do. It's they do a good job over there. Their episodes are always entertaining, and they definitely leave you scratching your head sometimes. That's for sure. Nick, what do you got going on? Anything?
I mean, every time we have a what's playing, and every time Dead Space comes up, I get closer to maybe streaming myself play Dead Space on normal.
Oh, that's cool.
It's just so
you have to do video
no, yeah, that's what I mean.
Your reactions.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Just like this. Yeah, I don't even know if it would be worth having the game on the screen. Just watch me, because I don't know. Literally, I slid back to that wall in my chair the one time. That game terrifies me.
Yeah,
it's just, and when it comes to just like, I just get in a panic, and it's all about like button smashing for me, and I panic as a character, and it's just a mess. It's a mess. And I think that's why I'm also bad at like some of the boss fights in Fallen Order frustrate me, or even just fighting things, because I just want to smash buttons. Like,
right, yeah,
I'm a God of War kind of person. Just like, let me sling the chains, just kill everything.
It's like, I don't want to fight. I just want to make my roads.
Yeah.
But yeah, hey, that brings up a good point. Another thing you can do in our Discord, occasionally Nick streams his gameplay. We have streaming channels. We also have recently started up a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/showboyspodcast, where occasionally someone will jump on there and stream. We're still trying to build that out and flesh that out. And one last piece of Showboys news, and then we'll get out of here, and we appreciate you sticking around for all this. But in 10 days, on March 14th, I believe, yes, March 14th at 9 p.m., we are bringing you a new show from Showboys, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier Companion Series. Our friend of show, Jordan, will be joining me every Sunday night after the premiere of the latest Falcon and Winter Soldier episode on Disney+. And just like our Mandalorian Companion series, we will be recapping, dissecting, overanalyzing, and speculating the crap out of every Falcon and Winter Soldier episode. So we hope that you will join us right here on our YouTube channel at 9 p.m. every Sunday night starting the 14th. If you're not able to make the live streams, don't worry, because we will be releasing the audio on every Tuesday. So we hope that you join us for that. It should be a lot of fun. I've loved the crap out of WandaVision, and it's gotten me so excited for Falcon and the Winter Soldier and the upcoming Loki series. So real excited to do this companion series, and hope that you will join us. Other than that, thank you so much for listening and sticking around. If you enjoyed what you heard, please like, rate, subscribe, follow, review, all the normal stuff we ask you to do. It really helps us out, and we'll see you next time. Later.